Hi, this is James Ang with Full Capital, and I'm here with Bethany with Premier Law Group. Bethany, how's it going?
Great. How are you?
Thanks. Thanks for joining. And so I wanted to get to know you a little bit better. And so maybe to kick it off, give us your background and then a little bit more about your company.
Absolutely. So Bethany LaFlam, I have been practicing law for 24 years now, uh, starting with mergers and acquisitions, doing capital raises, securities work for venture, and now my focus is solely on securities transactions for real estate investors. And I'm partnered with Mauricio Raould in Premier Law Group, and that is 100% of our focus of our practice is real estate syndicators.
Okay, so when people are out there, maybe let's say they find a deal, it's $10 million dollars, and they call me and say, "Hey, James, what type of loan can we get on this?" So that might bring $6 million dollars in today's market, and then they've got to come up with the other 4 million. And so when they call you, what is sort of the initial conversation like? Bethany, I need to raise $4 million dollars. What questions do you have for them?
The first thing that I try to do is ask them what's the goal of the race, right? Who are your investors? Who are your partners? What's the goal? And then we can help structure a deal around that. So of course we have to help you. If you're raising capital from passive investors, we have to help you stay compliant with securities laws. That's kind of the baseline. But what I want to know is what's your goal for your business? Or is this the only deal you're ever going to do? Are these your partners you're going to have every single time? Who are you looking to for investors? And then we can structure a deal around that. So I really want to know actually what's the goal of the raise.
Okay.
4 million, yes, but what else? What else? That's going to help dictate how you structure your deal.
Okay, so let's say, all right, this is my first deal. I don't know if I'm gonna do this ever again. Um, would I go down the road of 506B or 506C, or is there another option that I'm not aware of behind door three? But
There is
those are the
another
main ones that
option.
I'm familiar with.
Yeah. Okay, so there is another option on door three, but it really is just combining the first two, right? And so
Okay.
a lot of times, what first timers do is they say, you know what, I really need to go to my friends and family first to start this raise, but maybe I don't know enough wealthy people to get a whole raise done, right?
Okay.
That would have been me when I was starting, for example. So you can start off with a 506B that lets you get in up to 35 of the non-accredited investors, but you got to stick with your close circle, right? You can't generally solicit or advertise. A lot of times first timers can't get the deal done that way. So then they can start with the B, start off in stealth mode, go to all the people you know, get everybody you know in the deal. And then within the same offering raise, it's technically two separate offerings, but for the same project, you can actually then stop it, cut it off, and then start advertising and switch over to a 506C where you've
Okay.
advertised. Then you have to start verifying that your investors are all accredited because at that point they all have to be accredited. So you can do a hybrid 506B to a 506C, never the other way around, but starting off with a B and going to a C. That's a lot of time, first timers like that option.
Okay. When was that an option, or when did that become an option? Because I felt like everybody, that was like the question of the day back in, let's say, 21 or 22, when a lot of transactions were happening on the acquisition side. And so everybody was like, well, I can advertise on 506C, but everyone's got to be accredited. And, my mother-in-law, she's been in every deal, but she's not accredited or
Right.
what have you, right? And so when did that happen? Was there a, you
It's
remember?
relatively new, but we started doing it at PLG probably around 2020.
2020. Okay.
Mauricio did a deep dive into the rules. There was a new rule that came out. It was kind of stealthy. He did a deep dive into it, tried to break it and figure out, make sure it was really going to be okay to do that. Because a lot of times, you worry it's within the same offering. Can we, or the same deal? It's two separate offerings technically, but within the same deal, can you do it? Did that deep dive. We got really comfortable with how to structure it and we disclose it up front. It's actually pretty simple. So we've been
Okay.
doing it for a few years now.
So, you know, thinking back to all these equity raises and that I've seen as a LP, GP, lender, everything, um, is there any more protection for the GP choosing B or C? Because, I think sometimes people were under the impression that, look, if I do a 506C, everyone, goes and verifies they're accredited. Then if something goes wrong, well, they're accredited, they've got money. and that's not too bad. But on the B side, maybe these people, whether the SEC feels bad for them or what have you, that's a higher percentage of their net worth potentially going into, because a lot of these deals, I mean, it was 50 to 100,000 minimums on a lot of deals. So, is there any more protection on the B and C side, B or C side?
Well, so I mean, your instinct is right in that when you do a 506c, the law is going to kind of care a little bit, not care a little bit less, but protect the investors a little bit less because they're wealthier. It's going to impact them less, and they ought to know better. For whatever reason, the law treats wealthier people as though they're smarter, even though I think we
Sure.
we probably all know that's not exactly the truth. But yes, it is true that the law sort of favors the accredited investor, and so it's a little less risky for GPs to do a 506c. That said, the reason that 506b is set up the way it is that you have to spoon feed. Basically, you have to give all of the risk disclosures you can think of. You do that and you're still protected, right? It is still a safe harbor from a public offering. It is an exemption rather from a public offering. You do all those risk disclosures, you're still going to be protected. So really the protection there is not necessarily the law, it's having a good lawyer.
Okay. So let's talk about when I'm going about, let's say I'm like, okay, I get a deal under contract, and now I'm trying to choose a lawyer, right? I know I need to do a 506B, 506C to raise this equity. What differentiates attorneys putting together PPMs?
That's a really good question, and we have done some surveys over the years to kind of figure out like what is it that's going to help us set ourselves apart from
Right.
other attorneys. Because the PPM is the PPM. I mean, we hope that no one's committing malpractice and they're giving good documents, right? But you might not even know that for a few years unless somebody sues you or the deal goes sideways or whatever, which that's starting to happen in this market. So really, I think what sets us apart, one is our turnaround speed. Once we get all the information we need, it's a 2 weeks at the outside for you to get draft documents. Time kills deals, and so we pride ourselves on being really fast with the turnaround time. That's one thing. And then the other one is access to attorneys. A lot of complaints that we got from people is, look, I can't even get a hold of an attorney. I've had people call me that had other attorneys like, can you answer these questions? And I'm like, I didn't do those docs. And they're like, yeah, but we can't get a hold of our lawyer who did. Right. So access to attorneys and turnaround time is something that we have found to be really critical. And then the other part of that is understanding your business really and understanding what it is you're trying to accomplish, right? Hearing the goals and saying, oh, okay, based on, I know what your goals are, I might structure things a little bit differently for you than if it's just sort of a cookie cutter templated deal.
Okay.
I think those are probably the three most important factors.
Okay, and then you mentioned this in your comment. So let's say I raised my money, bought the deal in 2021. Now, 3 years later, everything's going okay, but we need a little bit more money.
Mhm.
So let's say $1 million. I got to go back and get the $1 million. What are you seeing right now? Do I need to do a new offering? Do I need to, uh, or does it depend? Like everything.
Depends, which is such a lawyer answer, right? It does depend. It depends, first of all, on what your documents say. Is there a process in there for a capital call?
Okay.
Sometimes there is and sometimes there's not.
So is it the operating agreement or the PPM that dictates this?
Operating agreement. So
Okay, so
once you're done
operating agreement.
raising
Okay.
money, the operating agreement takes over. The
Okay.
PPM is really a disclosure document. It's letting all your investors know what's the potential investors know what's the risk of getting into this deal. After
Okay.
that's done, now you're working under the operating agreement. And that should give you your process.
Okay.
Now, we also might look at the PPM to see what did you disclose about that,
Right.
right? Sure. Because a lot of times what'll happen, and a lot of times in our documents, what we'll do is you want to go to your investors first and check with them first to do a capital call. So it might be that you have to do a capital call first, or at least try to, and then you can do an additional raise. It could be that the GPs could be allowed to or have to participate or loan money. So it's going to really depend on what your operating agreement says and what you disclose to your investors.
What do most, I hate to say, what's the most common scenario for like if you guys do operating agreements as well as the PPM?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Typically, what you're going to see is you're going to go to your investor pool, your investor base first, and do a
Current investors. Okay.
yeah. But it's almost never required. right?
Okay.
This is different than other assets like venture or whatever. The investors in real estate typically don't expect to have to pony up any more money later.
Okay.
Really, all things, going well.
Yeah.
So you go to the investors and you say, okay, look, we have a shortfall of whatever for a million reasons, right?
Right.
Lending changed, whatever, construction costs, a lot of different reasons that could have happened.
Okay.
You go to your investors and say, we need to raise a little bit more. You don't necessarily have to, investor, but if you don't and other people do, you're going to get diluted. That's
Yeah.
just how it works because now the pie is bigger and your piece didn't get any bigger.
Right. Yeah. You didn't put in your
So,
percentage. Sure.
right. So you don't have to. You're not going to lose. You're going to lose the equity you already have because you didn't put up more money, but you would get diluted down.
Okay. So let's say you go back to them and they chip in you 500,000. So you're still short. You thought you needed a million. You put in 500. Um, and I guess now I'm taking this out to new investors
Yeah.
outside of this group. At that time, do I need a PPM?
You at least need, depending on how long it's been, you at least need to update your existing PPM to tell what's been going on since the time you raised money before. But
Okay.
yes, we'll need to offer those new people a PPM. It is still a securities offering. They're new people. You've got to give all the risk disclosures. And
Okay.
now it's a little trickier because before you didn't have any operating history. When you raise money at the beginning of a
Mm,
real estate deal, it's a brand new company. It's based on projections, which are really educated guesses.
right.
Now you've got real operating history, right? So and then we have to look back at depending on how long ago it was, are we allowed to accept non-accredited investors or not? Because if you already advertised before and it's still within a short window, we've got to look at all the history of what's been going on. So in that case, you are going to need some new risk disclosures and a new process,
It's
depending on what.
almost harder.
Yeah, yeah,
Because a lot of times when you
yeah,
read the PPM of a lot of these deals, it's like, okay, well, this is a new company. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't own the property currently, and all this other stuff. Okay, so when you go out and raise equity midstream here on a deal, it's definitely a little bit more challenging just on the
yeah.
disclosures and going out to investors. I mean, have you guys done any of those recently? How has
Yeah.
it gone? I mean, you don't
Somewhat.
have to give so you don't have to give specific details, but what sort of what's incentivizing an outside investor to come in to a new deal that has a shortfall right now?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times you have to offer something a little bit better, which puts
Okay.
your initial investors in a worse
Worst
position.
position, sure. Yeah.
But you almost always have to offer something a little better to come into a deal that's either struggling or has a shortfall
So is it
or
like a preferred place in the capital stack, like right after the debt? So maybe now
so
they're in front of your limited partners who invested in the deal 3 years ago.
yeah.
And then are you seeing them paid like a current payment or is it mostly accrued? Have you structured that?
It's mostly going to be accrued. I mean, there's
Okay.
usually not a lot of extra cash here when I mean, hopefully, if you're doing a capital call, there probably haven't been any distributions in a minute,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
there's not cash. Hopefully, the cash has been going to operations versus
Yeah.
I have seen a few where they'll give a distribution and then turn around the very next quarter and basically ask for it back in a
Hey
capital.
guys, that
Sorry, we
money we
gave
sent
that to you.
out.
I
Yeah.
shouldn't have. Yeah.
Right.
Which it happens, but it,
Right.
it might be a signal to your investors of, oh, we weren't even looking far enough ahead to know that this was happening.
Right.
Sometimes things happen, like there's a disaster at the property or,
A
stuff
big
happens. So
incident.
it's
Yeah.
not always an operator problem. It's not always their fault. But yeah, typically when you're going to go at that's one of the reasons why you want to give your current investors that first option to get in more so that someone's not going to come in and get ahead of them
Right.
after.
Okay, the initial guys. Okay. So they don't. And then what are you seeing right now? I mean, talk about what deals you guys are working on now, just at a high level, in terms of whether it's brand new acquisitions or these raises that are second or after the fact, after the initial raise.
We had a moment there where I would get a couple calls a week asking how to do a capital call. So there
Right.
was there's a bit of that. Not as much right now. We're seeing acquisitions slow down just a little bit, especially in multifamily.
Yep.
Not stop. We've got clients doing deals are a little bit pickier. It's a little longer to get them to pencil, that kind of thing. We're seeing people restructure old deals to they rates have changed, things like that. They're trying to restructure their debt. Some of our clients are doing their own funds to then basically take out their existing debt. So they're raising
Okay.
money to take out other debt. That's happened in a few deals. And then we're seeing, honestly, a lot of clients, we saw a big uptick in acquisitions for a while there,
Yeah.
right? And now clients that bought a bunch of stuff are really taking a moment to really focus on operations.
Sure. Sure.
So there's been the best operators are focusing really hard on operations, and those are the people that are, I think, gonna sort of make it through. I think it's just everybody's saying hold on till 25, right? Was stay alive till 25 is what I keep hearing people say.
Right.
We're seeing a little bit slower to get to deals, but still deals. Multifamily slowed down a little.
Yeah.
Short-term rentals are doing okay, boutique hotels is, doing okay. Storage, but everybody's a little slower right now.
What do you think? And you've done this a while, and you've been on both sides of these transactions on some of these deals. What are some of the best practices, like the GPs? Like sometimes when I'm underwriting a deal and I'm working with a borrower, you can sort of tell that this guy is gonna, make it through on this project,
Mhm.
and do well just from the way that they communicate with you.
Yeah.
What are some of those best practices for that you've seen, that general partners can emulate out there?
I think the first thing is if you know of an area that you are lacking, do hardcore diligence and get a partner that can help there. Don't try to figure this out on your investor's dime. Do due diligence, bring in partners, and not to raise money. Can't bring in partners just to raise money, but to operate,
Mm,
right? Make sure
okay.
that you have solid operators. Do your diligence just as hard as you would do on a property on your partners.
Yeah.
That's because your investors would expect that, your lenders would expect that, and your lender is your first investor. So that's where we're starting, and you want to make sure that you're doing right by them. The other part of that is over communicate. Things that you think you hope your lender or your investors don't find out, that's what you ought to be telling them.
Yeah.
Over communicate, because I've seen deals go sideways where the investors, they weren't caught by surprise, and they're like, well, it happens. I knew that when I was getting into the deal that there were risks because you told us
Yeah.
beginning there were risks. That's what that 100-page document said. I knew because you were discussing this with me. I knew what was happening because you told me the whole way where you were hitting roadblocks, where you were struggling, and what you were doing to try to remedy that. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But we see a lot fewer investors and lenders get upset if they already knew it was coming, and that the GPs were taking reasonable steps to stay ahead of it as best they could. So over communicate, even when it's bad. That's probably the very best thing.
And then as in anything during the initial acquisition or working with you guys, any best practices you've seen from general partners?
Um, well, I mean, the first part is again doing hardcore diligence on the partners.
Right.
But also you can kind of tell like the people that are actually, everyone says they're conservative in their underwriting. I'm sure you hear that all the time, right? Everyone says they are, but people who are actually pretty conservative in their underwriting and aren't trying to squish things in to get to a certain number, aren't making up cap rates
Sure.
at close, of this sort of aspirational, I mean, number that they think is going to happen in 3 years or whatever. People who've seen these cycles and recognize that they're cycles and say, hey, I've been paying attention. I was here in 08. I was here, last year, whatever. I know where this is going to go, and here's how I'm going to safeguard against it being cyclical in real estate. I got to survive. It's going to be tough for a minute, but I got to know how to survive that. People that are already looking at it going, it's not just pie in the sky. I'm going to get this amazing, cap rate when I sell, and I'm going to force appreciation, and everybody wins based on my appreciation. And I'm going to sell in 3 years. Like people need to be real operators and not just sort of
Right.
making stuff up. That's really what it is.
So, Bethany, you will be in Dallas in October at the conference.
I
I'm
will. I'm
excited for you to
looking
come
forward to it.
down. So in the meantime, though, if people have questions about, their operating agreement or PPM or what have you, what is the best way for people to reach out to you?
They can reach me at my email, which is bethany@plglp.com. Also, Mauricio and I both put out some educational content. You can take a look at our Instagram or YouTube.
Okay. All right. Thank you for coming on today, Bethany.
For having me.
All right. See ya.